The moment Marcus Washington stepped into the gleaming lobby of the Harrington Conference Center, he could feel eyes tracking him. Not with recognition, not with respect, but with suspicion. The space buzzed with the energy of the annual Global Technology Summit, which is the most prestigious tech gathering on the East Coast. Fortune 500 CEOs mingled with venture capitalists. Industry pioneers exchanged ideas with eager startups. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of the Harrington Conference Center as Dr. Marcus Washington pulled his modest Honda Civic into a space marked VIP parking. The irony wasn't lost on him. In a lot filled with Mercedes, BMWs, and Teslas, his reliable but unremarkable vehicle stood out like a sore thumb. Marcus sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, preparing himself mentally for what lay ahead. At 38, he had learned to armor himself before entering these spaces, the predominantly white affluent circles, where his presence was often questioned before his credentials were even considered. He reached for his phone and scrolled through his morning messages. 3 texts from his research team back at Nexus Innovations, updating him on their latest quantum computing breakthrough. 2 emails from MIT professors seeking collaboration on neural network applications. And 1 message from his sister Maya that simply read, "Knock 'em dead today, little brother. Mom's watching from somewhere." Marcus smiled at that last message. Their mother, Sarah Washington, had passed away 3 years ago, but her influence lived on in every room he entered. She had been a postal worker who dreamed of being a scientist, channeling her unfulfilled ambitions into supporting her children's education. "You're going to open doors that were closed to me," she used to tell him. "But remember, once you're through, you prop them open for others." The weight of that responsibility had shaped every decision of his career. Marcus gathered his belongings, a simple black backpack containing his laptop, presentation materials, and a worn leather journal his mother had given him for his PhD graduation. He had deliberately chosen his outfit the night before: dark jeans, a charcoal button-up shirt, and comfortable walking shoes. Professional but not flashy, competent but not intimidating. Years of experience had taught him this careful balance. Dress too casually and you'd be mistaken for service staff. Dress too formally and you'd be seen as trying too hard or not belonging. There was a narrow window of acceptability, and Marcus had learned to navigate it with precision. As he walked toward the imposing glass entrance of the conference center, Marcus observed the other attendees streaming in. A group of venture capitalists in expensive suits, their voices carrying the confident timbre of men accustomed to being heard. A cluster of young tech entrepreneurs, their designer hoodies and limited edition sneakers, a uniform of studied casualness that likely cost more than most people's monthly salaries. And then there was him, a black man with a backpack, walking with quiet confidence toward one of the most exclusive tech gatherings on the East Coast. The moment Marcus Washington stepped into the gleaming lobby of the Harrington Conference Center, he could feel eyes tracking him. Not with recognition, not with respect, but with suspicion. The space buzzed with the energy of the annual Global Technology Summit, the most prestigious tech gathering on the East Coast. Fortune 500 CEOs mingled with venture capitalists. Industry pioneers exchanged ideas with eager startups. The air thrummed with the electricity of power, money, and influence converging in one place. Marcus paused for a moment, taking in the scene. The lobby was a testament to modern architectural grandeur. Soaring ceilings supported by gleaming steel beams, walls of floor-to-ceiling glass offering views of the city skyline, and a massive digital display cycling through the logos of the summit's platinum sponsors. The marble floors reflected the soft lighting from crystal chandeliers overhead. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and fresh flowers, the scent of power and privilege. Everything was designed to impress, to intimidate, to remind visitors that they were in the presence of greatness. Marcus adjusted his simple black backpack on his shoulder. His dark jeans and charcoal button-up were pressed and clean, but deliberately understated. No flashy watch. No designer labels. Just a man who knew his worth didn't need to be announced by his clothing. As he moved deeper into the lobby, Marcus caught fragments of conversation floating around him. Closed the Series B at a $200 million valuation. The quantum computing implications are staggering. If we can corner the AI market before the Chinese. These were his people, in a sense. The language of technology, innovation, and strategic thinking was his native tongue. Yet he moved through the crowd like a ghost, unrecognized and largely ignored. At the information desk, a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair looked up from her tablet. "Good morning. Are you here for the Global Technology Summit?" "Yes," Marcus replied. "I'm Dr. Marcus Washington. I believe you have my speaker credentials." The woman's fingers flew over her tablet screen. "Oh, Dr. Washington, yes. We've been expecting you. Your keynote presentation tomorrow morning has generated quite a buzz. The CEO of Quantum Sphere has already asked to meet with you." She handed him a folder containing his conference materials, along with a temporary badge. "Your VIP credentials are being held at the reception desk inside the VIP lounge. Ms. Chen will get you set up with everything you need." Marcus thanked her and surveyed the lobby, locating the VIP reception area. Behind those polished doors waited the conference organizers, keynote speakers, and tech luminaries who would shape the conversation for the entire three-day event. He moved with quiet confidence toward the VIP reception area, his mind already shifting to the presentation he would deliver tomorrow. The breakthrough his team had achieved in quantum neural networks represented years of painstaking research, countless failed experiments, and moments of pure scientific euphoria when the pieces finally clicked into place. Marcus reached for his phone to pull up his credentials, wanting to have everything ready for the check-in process. That's when a meaty hand clamped down on his shoulder. "Excuse me, sir, where do you think you're going?" The security guard, a heavy-set white man with a crew cut and an oversized blazer with security emblazoned across the back, stepped directly into Marcus's path. His name tag read Davidson, and his eyes held the hardened look of someone who had spent years dealing with people he considered beneath him. Marcus had encountered men like Davidson before, the type who used their small authority as a weapon, who found validation in the power to say no to people they deemed unworthy, the type who saw a black man with a backpack and immediately made assumptions about his purpose and his place. "The VIP reception," Marcus replied calmly, continuing to retrieve his phone. His voice carried the measured tone of someone who had navigated these waters many times before. Davidson's eyes narrowed, scanning Marcus from head to toe. The security guard's assessment was written plainly on his face. The dismissive evaluation of clothing, appearance, and perceived social status. "Do you have an invitation?" "I do. I'm just pulling it up." Marcus's voice remained level, though a familiar tension began coiling in his stomach. This was the moment he had been dreading, the inevitable confrontation that seemed to follow him into every professional space. Davidson crossed his arms, his stance becoming more aggressive. Behind him, Marcus could see other conference attendees, mostly white men in expensive suits, moving freely through the VIP area without being stopped or questioned. No one asked to see their credentials. No one questioned their right to be there. "Staff entrance is around back," Davidson said, his tone carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Caterers need to check in with event management first." The assumption hit Marcus like a physical blow, but he'd been here before, too many times to count. The lecture hall where a professor had asked if he was in the right classroom. The corporate boardroom where executives had assumed he was there to fix the projector. The high-end restaurant where the hostess had automatically directed him to the service entrance. Each incident had been a small cut, and over the years those cuts had formed a pattern of scarring that Marcus carried with him everywhere he went. "I'm not catering staff," Marcus said, his voice still controlled, but with an edge of steel creeping in. "I'm attending the reception." Davidson's lips thinned into a skeptical line. Behind him, 2 other security personnel glanced over, their attention drawn by the developing situation. One of them, a younger man with gelled hair and nervous eyes, began moving toward them. "Look," Davidson said, lowering his voice in the way people do when they want to avoid making a scene while still asserting their authority. "Let's not make this difficult. This area is for invited VIP guests only." The younger security guard arrived, his eyes darting between Davidson and Marcus. "Everything okay here, John?" "Just explaining to this gentleman that the VIP area requires proper credentials," Davidson said, emphasizing the word gentleman in a way that stripped it of all respect. The word became a weapon, a subtle way of signaling that Marcus was anything but a gentleman in Davidson's eyes. People were beginning to stare. A cluster of attendees in expensive suits paused their conversation to watch the unfolding drama. 2 women in cocktail dresses whispered to each other, their eyes darting between Marcus and the security guards. The whispers began to spread, creating a bubble of attention around the confrontation. Marcus felt the familiar burn of humiliation mixed with anger, a sensation he'd first experienced as a 10-year-old when a store clerk had followed him through the aisles, and that had never fully disappeared, no matter how many degrees he earned or how high he climbed in his profession. "I understand," Marcus replied, finally unlocking his phone. "That's why I'm going in. I'm one of the speakers." Davidson let out a dismissive snort that carried years of practiced condescension. "Right, and I'm Elon Musk." The joke fell flat, but it revealed everything about Davidson's mindset. The idea that a black man could be a keynote speaker at a prestigious technology conference was so foreign to him that it became a punchline. Marcus took a deep breath, centering himself. He had learned long ago that anger, however justified, would only make the situation worse. He needed to remain calm, professional, and focused on the goal of simply getting through the door and doing his job. "I'm Dr. Marcus Washington," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned the right to be heard. "Chief Technology Officer at Nexus Innovations and the keynote speaker for tomorrow's opening session on quantum neural networks." Davidson's eyebrows rose, but skepticism remained etched in every line of his face. "Sure you are. And I suppose you've got proof of that." "I do." Marcus turned his phone screen toward the guard, displaying the official Summit app with his speaker profile, complete with his professional headshot, biographical information, and detailed schedule for the 3-day event. Davidson barely glanced at the screen. His dismissal was so quick, so automatic, that it was clear he had already made up his mind. "Anyone can pull up a picture. I need to see official ID and your VIP badge." The younger guard, whose name tag read Peterson, leaned in, actually looking at the phone screen. His expression began to change as he processed what he was seeing. John, I think this might actually be—" "I've been doing this job for 15 years, Davidson cut him off, his voice rising slightly. "I know when someone's trying to sneak in where they don't belong." Those words hung in the air like a challenge. The implication was clear. Marcus didn't belong here, regardless of his credentials or his professional achievements. In Davidson's worldview, there were certain spaces that were reserved for certain types of people, and Marcus was not one of them. The tension in the lobby was thickening like a storm cloud. More people were watching now, some with curiosity, others with discomfort. A few had their phones out, perhaps sensing that something significant was happening. Marcus felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon him. He was no longer just trying to get to a reception. He was being forced to defend his very right to exist in this space. "My badge is being held for me inside," Marcus explained, his voice still controlled, but firmer now. "Catherine Chen, the event director, has it at the registration table. You can call her to verify." Davidson's hand moved to the radio at his belt, not to call for verification, but in a subtle show of authority, a warning. The gesture was unmistakable: comply or face escalation. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. The VIP area is for authorized personnel only." Before Marcus could respond, a sharp voice cut through the tension like a blade. "What the hell is going on here?" A woman in a sleek gray suit approached, her heels clicking authoritatively against the marble floor. Everything about her bearing screamed executive authority, from her perfectly styled silver hair to the way she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in charge. Her name badge identified her as Alicia Mercer, conference director. She was the kind of woman who had climbed the corporate ladder through a combination of brilliance, determination, and the ability to cut through nonsense with surgical precision. "Just handling a situation, Ms. Mercer," Davidson replied, straightening his posture in the way subordinates do when their boss appears unexpectedly. This man was attempting to enter the VIP area without proper credentials. Alicia's eyes moved from Davidson to Marcus, and Marcus saw the moment of recognition flicker across her features. Her expression shifted from mild interest to dawning horror as she realized what was happening. "Are you kidding me right now?" she asked, her voice carrying the dangerous quiet of someone barely containing their rage. She turned fully toward Marcus, her professional demeanor shifting to one of mortified apology. "Dr. Washington, I'm so sorry about this. We've been waiting for you." Davidson's face went slack, the color draining from his cheeks as the implications of what he had done began to sink in. "Dr. Washington is our headline keynote speaker," Alicia continued, each word precisely enunciated as she glared at Davidson. "His revolutionary work on quantum neural networks is the reason half these people paid $10,000 to be here." The lobby had gone silent. Every conversation had stopped. Every eye was focused on the unfolding drama. The weight of collective attention was almost palpable. There must be some misunderstanding," Davidson stammered, his confident demeanor evaporating like morning mist. "He didn't have a badge." "Because we have it waiting inside, as we do for all our VIP speakers." Alicia cut him off, her voice rising with each word. "Did you even bother to check the speaker list before harassing Dr. Washington?" The younger security guard, Peterson, was frantically swiping through something on his phone. His face grew pale as he found what he was looking for. "He's right here, John. Main bio, front page of the app. Dr. Marcus Washington, Chief Technology Officer at Nexus Innovations, keynote speaker for the opening session." Davidson's face flushed red, a mixture of embarrassment and desperate self-preservation. "I was just following protocol." "Your protocol includes profiling our keynote speaker." Alicia's voice was ice, sharp enough to cut glass. "Dr. Washington, please come with me. The CEO of Microsoft has been asking to meet you." She extended her arm, not quite touching Marcus, but creating a clear barrier between him and Davidson. The gesture was both protective and declarative. "This man is under my protection, and this conversation is over." Marcus gave Davidson one last look, Not angry, not smug, just weary with the weight of 1,000 similar encounters. It was the look of someone who had fought this battle too many times, who had grown tired of having to prove his worth in spaces where others were simply accepted. "Thank you, Ms. Mercer," he said quietly, following her toward the VIP doors. Behind them, Davidson stood frozen, his mouth working silently as the whispering crowds around him grew louder. The damage was done, and this time there would be consequences. As they walked away from the scene, Marcus could hear fragments of conversation erupting around them. "Did you see that? They stopped the keynote speaker." Thought he was catering staff. "Someone's getting fired over this." The murmurs followed them like a wave, carrying the news of what had just occurred to every corner of the lobby. Inside the VIP lounge, the atmosphere was markedly different from the tension of the lobby. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over leather furniture and intimate conversation areas. The room hummed with the quiet energy of powerful people in their element, the soft clink of glasses, the rustle of expensive fabric, the low murmur of deals being made and partnerships being forged. Alicia guided Marcus toward a private corner, away from the main flow of traffic. Her face was still flushed with anger, but she was clearly making an effort to regain her professional composure. "I can't begin to apologize enough, Doctor Washington," she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "That was inexcusable, absolutely inexcusable." Marcus set his backpack down beside a leather armchair, taking a moment to center himself. The shift from the hostile environment of the lobby to the welcoming atmosphere of the VIP lounge felt surreal, like stepping from one world into another. "Unfortunately, it wasn't unexpected," he replied, accepting a glass of water from a passing server. The simple act of hospitality, being offered refreshment rather than being questioned and challenged, highlighted the contrast between how he was treated once his identity was established versus how he was treated as an unknown black man with a backpack. "I promise you this will be addressed immediately," Alicia said, her eyes flashing with genuine anger. "Davidson won't be working this conference another minute. In fact, I'm going to call his supervisor right now and demand his immediate removal." Marcus nodded, appreciating her swift action while recognizing the larger implications. "I appreciate that, but firing one security guard doesn't solve the underlying problem." It was a conversation he'd had many times before, the well-meaning response of addressing the immediate symptom while ignoring the systemic disease. One guard would be fired, policies would be reviewed, and everyone would feel better about themselves. But the attitudes and assumptions that led to the incident would remain largely unchanged. Alicia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and winced. "It's already on social media. Someone filmed the whole thing." Marcus wasn't surprised. In the age of smartphones, these moments rarely remained private. Part of him was weary at the thought of becoming the next viral example of workplace discrimination. Another part recognized the potential for change such exposure might bring. Dr. Washington, a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit, approached, hand outstretched. "Robert Kincaid, CEO of Quantum Sphere Technologies. Your paper on neural quantum architecture was revolutionary. We've been implementing your framework in our latest prototype." And just like that, Marcus was pulled back into the world where his mind, not his skin, defined him, where his ideas carried weight and commanded respect, where people approached him with deference and genuine intellectual curiosity. "Mr. Kincaid," Marcus replied, shaking the man's hand. "I've been following your work on quantum error correction. Your team's approach to decoherence mitigation is impressive." "Please call me Robert, and thank you. Coming from you, that means everything." "I was hoping we could discuss a potential collaboration. Our research division has been struggling with some of the implementation challenges you solved in your latest paper." As they talked, Marcus found himself slipping into the comfortable rhythm of technical discussion. This was his element, the world of quantum mechanics, neural networks, and computational theory. Here, his expertise was unquestioned, his contributions valued, his presence welcomed. But even as he engaged in the conversation, the incident in the lobby continued to simmer beneath the surface of his thoughts. It wasn't the first time, it wouldn't be the last. The question was whether anything would truly change, or if this would simply become another story people told about the unfortunate realities of being a black professional in predominantly white spaces. More people approached. A venture capitalist interested in quantum computing investments, a professor from Stanford seeking collaboration on a research project, a journalist writing about the future of artificial intelligence. Each interaction was respectful, engaging, intellectually stimulating. Yet Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was living in two different worlds simultaneously. In one world, he was Dr. Marcus Washington, respected scientist and innovative thinker. In the other, he was simply a black man with a backpack, automatically suspect and required to prove his right to exist in certain spaces. "Dr. Washington," Alicia appeared at his elbow, her face still set with determination. "I've spoken with the CEO of Harrington Security Services. Davidson has been immediately suspended pending a full investigation. They're sending a replacement team within the hour." Marcus nodded, though he wondered how many other Dr. Washingtons had been stopped at doors over the years, without anyone filming the incident or demanding accountability. "I've also reached out to the local news stations," Alicia continued. "They're interested in covering this story. It might help prevent similar incidents in the future." "Maybe," Marcus said, though he had learned to be cautious about putting too much faith in media coverage as an agent of change. But real change happens when people examine their own assumptions and biases, not just when they're caught on camera. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister Maya. "Saw the video online? You okay?" Marcus typed back, "I'm fine. Nothing I haven't dealt with before." Her response was immediate. "That's exactly the problem." She was right. That was exactly the problem. The normalization of discrimination, the acceptance of being questioned and challenged in spaces where others moved freely, the constant need to prove one's worth and justify one's presence. Marcus looked around the VIP lounge at the successful, powerful people engaged in animated conversation. How many of them had ever been stopped at a door? How many had ever had their credentials questioned based on their appearance? How many had ever felt the particular type of humiliation that came with being assumed to be service staff in a space where they were actually the guest of honor? The answer, he knew, was very few. It started small. A cell phone video, shaky footage capturing Davidson's dismissive tone, Marcus's calm explanation, the revelation of his identity, the security guard's stammering backpedal. Within an hour, Wrongfully Profiled was trending on Twitter. The video had been posted by Jennifer Martinez, a tech journalist who had been in the lobby covering the conference. Her tweet read, "Watch, security guard blocks black scientist from VIP area at tech conference, plot twist. He's the keynote speaker. This is Dr. Marcus Washington, CTO of Nexus Innovations and leader in quantum computing research. This is what bias looks like." Wrongfully Profiled, our tech conference 2024. The tweet had been retweeted over 10,000 times in the first hour. Comments ranged from outrage to support to, unfortunately, some attempting to defend Davidson's actions. Tech Advocate 99. This is exactly why diversity in tech matters. How many brilliant minds have been turned away at doors by people who couldn't see past their own prejudices? Quantum Queen. Dr. Washington's research on neural quantum networks is groundbreaking. The fact that he was profiled at a conference where he's the main speaker is beyond disgusting. Realist tech. Maybe if he had dressed more professionally, this wouldn't have happened. Security guards have a job to do. Silicon Valley mom. To those saying he should have dressed better, there are white men in hoodies and jeans walking into that same area unchallenged. Miss me with that victim-blaming nonsense. By morning, major tech blogs had picked up the story. Leading AI researcher profiled at conference where he was keynote speaker, read the headline on TechCrunch. The article included Marcus's impressive bio, details about his groundbreaking research, and quotes from other attendees who had witnessed the incident. VentureBeat ran a piece titled, "The Quantum Physicist Who Couldn't Enter His Own Conference." The article used the incident as a launching point for a broader discussion about diversity in tech and the barriers faced by underrepresented minorities in STEM fields. Wired published an analysis called "When Brilliance Meets Bias: The Marcus Washington Incident." The piece examined how unconscious bias operates in professional settings and the particular challenges faced by Black professionals in predominantly white industries. Marcus woke in his hotel room to a barrage of notifications. His phone showed 247 missed calls, 1,834 text messages, and 5,629 email notifications. The numbers were overwhelming, almost surreal. Interview requests from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and NPR filled his inbox. Messages of support poured in from colleagues, former students, and people he'd never met. There were also, unfortunately, messages of a different sort. Angry emails from people who thought he was playing the race card or making too big a deal of the incident. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Maya, sister. "Hey," he answered, his voice hoarse from sleep. "Jesus, Marcus, I can't believe this is happening. Are you okay?" "I'm processing," he said, scrolling through the endless stream of notifications. "I never wanted this kind of attention." "I know, but maybe it's what needs to happen. Maybe this is bigger than just you." Marcus stood by the window of his hotel room, looking out at the city skyline. The morning sun was just beginning to paint the buildings in shades of gold and orange. Somewhere out there, millions of people were starting their day, and many of them would encounter the story of what happened to him in a hotel lobby. "The conference organizers want to address this at the opening session," he told Maya. "They're asking if I want to speak about it." "What do you want to do?" Marcus considered the question. Part of him wanted to focus solely on his research, to talk about quantum computing and neural networks, and the fascinating possibilities at the intersection of physics and artificial intelligence. That's what he'd come here to do. But another part of him recognized the platform he now had, however unwillingly acquired. How many times had similar incidents occurred without being captured on video? How many brilliant minds had been turned away at doors, discouraged from pursuing careers in tech, or made to feel unwelcome in spaces where they belonged? "I think I have to address it," he said finally, "but not to dwell on it, to use it as a starting point for something bigger." "What do you mean?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, an idea beginning to form in his mind. "I don't know yet, but maybe this incident can be a catalyst for something positive. Maybe it can help open doors for others." After ending the call with Maya, Marcus sat at the small desk in his hotel room and began to revise his keynote presentation. The original speech had been a deep dive into the technical aspects of quantum neural networks. Fascinating to fellow scientists, but perhaps too narrow in scope for the broader conversation he now had an opportunity to start. He opened his laptop and began typing, the words flowing more easily than he had expected. "The quantum world operates on principles that challenge our everyday understanding of reality. Particles exist in multiple states simultaneously. Information can be transmitted instantaneously across vast distances. The act of observation itself changes the outcome of experiments. Today, I want to talk about how these quantum principles apply not just to computing but to human potential, how we can create systems that recognize and harness the full spectrum of human talent, how we can build technologies that expand opportunity rather than limit it. But first, I want to address what happened yesterday in the lobby of this very building. As Marcus worked on his revised presentation, the incident continued to gain momentum across social media and traditional news outlets. The video had been viewed over 2 million times, and the story had been picked up by major networks around the world. Harrington Security Services found themselves in damage control mode. Their CEO, William Harrington, released a statement. "We deeply regret the incident that occurred at the Global Technology Summit. The actions of our employee do not reflect our company's values or training standards. We are conducting a comprehensive review of our protocols and have engaged diversity consultants to address unconscious bias among our staff. The employee involved has been terminated immediately." The statement was carefully crafted by corporate lawyers and PR professionals, but it did little to stem the tide of criticism. The company's social media accounts were flooded with comments calling for broader reforms in the security industry. Meanwhile, Davidson himself had become the subject of intense scrutiny. Local news stations had tracked him down at his home, where he refused to comment beyond saying he was just doing his job. His social media profiles, which had been public, were quickly made private as internet users began dissecting his past posts and comments. The incident had also sparked a broader conversation about diversity in the tech industry. CEOs and executives who had remained silent on issues of inclusion were now being pressed to make statements about their company's commitment to diversity. Dr. Angela Martinez, a professor of organizational psychology at Harvard Business School, was interviewed on CNN about the incident. "What we saw in that lobby isn't an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a much larger problem. When someone's presence in a professional space is automatically questioned based on their appearance, it reveals deep-seated biases that affect not just that individual, but the entire culture of an organization or industry." The interviewer pressed her, "But wasn't the security guard just doing his job?" The question we need to ask is, whose job performance is being scrutinized? Dr. Washington had proper credentials and was exactly where he was supposed to be. The security guard made assumptions based on racial bias. If we're going to talk about job performance, let's talk about the failure to follow proper protocols and the decision to profile a guest based on appearance rather than verification procedures. Back at the conference, the atmosphere was tense. Other speakers and attendees were buzzing with discussion about the incident. Some expressed outrage and support for Marcus. Others seemed uncomfortable with the attention being drawn to issues of race and bias. Robert Kincaid, the CEO of Quantum Sphere Technologies, approached Marcus as he was reviewing his presentation notes in the speaker's lounge. "Dr. Washington, I wanted to personally apologize for what happened. It's unconscionable." "Thank you," Marcus replied, "but I hope this leads to more than just apologies. I hope it leads to real change." "What kind of change did you have in mind?" Marcus looked up from his notes. "I'm still working through that, but I think we need to move beyond just talking about diversity to actually creating systems that support it. That means examining our hiring practices, our conference planning, our assumptions about who belongs in certain spaces. Quantum Sphere would be interested in being part of that conversation," Kincaid said. "We've been working on diversity initiatives, but frankly, we could do more." Similar conversations were happening throughout the conference. The incident had forced a reckoning that many had been avoiding. Company executives were calling emergency meetings to review their diversity policies. Conference organizers were reassessing their security protocols and staff training. Alicia Mercer was fielding calls from journalists, board members, and other conference organizers, wanting to know how they could prevent similar incidents. She had barely slept, working through the night to address the crisis and plan for the opening session. "We need to turn this into a teachable moment," she told her staff during an emergency meeting. "This can't just be about damage control. We need to demonstrate real leadership and commitment to change." The conference's board of directors held an emergency session to discuss their response. Some members were concerned about the negative publicity and its potential impact on future events. Others saw it as an opportunity to position the conference as a leader in addressing diversity issues in tech. Board member Patricia Wong, a venture capitalist who had been advocating for greater diversity in the tech industry, was blunt in her assessment. "We can either be defensive and hope this blows over, or we can be proactive and use this as a catalyst for meaningful change. The choice will define not just this conference, but our industry's response to these issues." The board ultimately decided to support a comprehensive response that would include changes to security protocols, diversity training for all staff, and a commitment to supporting underrepresented groups in tech. The main conference hall was packed beyond capacity. 3,000 seats all filled, with overflow crowds watching on screens in adjacent rooms. The anticipation was palpable, heightened by the previous day's incident, which had now been covered by news outlets around the world. The audience was different from typical tech conferences. While the usual crowd of industry executives, venture capitalists, and entrepreneurs was present, there were also journalists, activists, and academics who had come specifically to hear Marcus address the incident and its implications. Backstage, Marcus reviewed his notes one final time. His hands were steady, his mind clear. This wasn't his first keynote address, but it was perhaps his most important. He had the opportunity to use this platform not just to showcase his research, but to catalyze a broader conversation about inclusion, bias, and the future of the tech industry. Alicia Mercer approached, offering a bottle of water. "Full house," she said, "and there are satellite feeds to universities and tech companies around the world, estimated global audience of over 50,000. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility. "Any word from the board?" "They're fully supportive. Whatever you want to say, you have their backing." The stage manager signaled 2 minutes. Marcus straightened his tie, a vibrant blue against his charcoal suit. The color choice was deliberate, professional but not subdued, confident but not aggressive. "You don't have to address the incident if you don't want to," Alicia said quietly. "Your research speaks for itself." Marcus gave her a small smile. "My research is why I'm here, but sometimes life gives you a platform for more than one message." As he walked toward the stage entrance, Marcus thought about his mother, about the postal worker who had dreamed of being a scientist, about the doors she had been unable to open, and the doors he now had the power to prop open for others. The introduction was brief but comprehensive, highlighting Marcus's credentials, his groundbreaking research, and his contributions to the field of quantum computing. When his name was announced, the applause was thunderous, louder and longer than typical for a technical conference. Marcus stepped onto the stage, adjusting the microphone and looking out at the sea of faces. The lighting was bright, but he could see the front rows clearly. Conference board members, tech executives, journalists with notebooks and recording devices at the ready. He waited for the applause to subside, using the moment to center himself and connect with the audience. When the room fell silent, he began. "Thank you for that warm welcome. I'm here today to talk about quantum neural networks and the future of artificial intelligence. He paused, his eyes scanning the audience. But first, I want to address what happened yesterday in the lobby of this very building. The room went completely still. Phones were raised to record. In the front row, the conference board members leaned forward. Many of you witnessed it. More saw it online. I was denied entry to the VIP reception because I didn't look like I belonged there. His voice remained measured, professional, but carried an undercurrent of steel. This isn't a unique experience for me, or for many people who look like me in the tech industry. He clicked to his first slide. Not the quantum computing diagram he'd originally planned, but a simple graph showing diversity statistics in tech leadership roles. I'm one of only 8 black CTOs in the Fortune 500. 8 out of 500. The number hung in the air like a challenge. That's 1.6%, for those of you who appreciate data as much as I do. A murmur rippled through the audience. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others nodded in recognition of the stark reality those numbers represented. Marcus clicked to another slide. More statistics. The lack of diversity in tech startups receiving venture funding. The percentage of computer science degrees awarded to underrepresented minorities. The representation of women and minorities in senior technical roles. These numbers tell a story, Marcus continued. A story where someone like me is statistically unlikely to be standing on this stage. A story where security guards make assumptions based on appearance rather than checking speaker lists. The next slide showed a photo of Marcus at age 12, standing beside his mother in their modest apartment, holding a homemade circuit board. The image was a stark contrast to the polished professional speaking to them now. This is where I started. My mother, Sarah Washington, was a postal worker who worked double shifts to buy me my first computer, a refurbished Dell that was already 3 generations out of date. I took it apart and rebuilt it dozens of times, teaching myself everything I could about how these machines worked. A gentle wave of appreciative laughter moved through the audience, the kind that comes from recognizing shared experiences with technology and curiosity. My mother never got to pursue her dream of becoming a scientist. The doors weren't open to her the way they've been opened to me, but she made sure I understood that every door I walked through, I had a responsibility to prop open for others. Marcus paused, letting that message sink in before continuing. I'm not standing here to shame anyone. Not the security guard, not this conference, not the tech industry as a whole. Shame doesn't create change. Understanding does. Action does. Systematic, intentional, sustained effort does. He clicked to his next slide, a QR code accompanied by bold text. I'm announcing today the launch of the Quantum Opportunity Initiative. My company, Nexus Innovations, is committing $50 million over the next 5 years to provide technology education, mentorship, and venture funding to underrepresented groups in tech. Surprised murmurs swept through the audience. In the front row, several board members were typing furiously on their phones. This wasn't just a response to an incident. It was a call to action backed by substantial resources. But this can't be a solo effort, Marcus continued. I'm inviting every company represented in this room to join us, because diversity isn't just a moral imperative. It's a competitive advantage. We cannot solve tomorrow's problems with yesterday's homogeneous thinking. He let that challenge hang in the air before transitioning to his technical presentation. Now, who's ready to talk about quantum neural networks? The applause was thunderous, but more importantly, it felt different. There was energy in the room now, a sense of purpose that went beyond just learning about new technology. For the next 45 minutes, Marcus delivered a masterclass on his groundbreaking research. He explained how quantum computing principles could be applied to neural network architectures, creating systems capable of processing information in fundamentally new ways. He demonstrated how his team's breakthrough in quantum entanglement could enable neural networks to perform certain calculations exponentially faster than traditional computers. He showed real-world applications, from drug discovery to climate modeling to artificial intelligence systems that could adapt and learn in ways previously thought impossible. The technical content was sophisticated, but Marcus had a gift for making complex concepts accessible. He used analogies and visual demonstrations that helped the audience understand not just what his research accomplished, but why it mattered. Imagine a neural network that doesn't just process information sequentially, but can explore multiple solutions, paths simultaneously through quantum superposition, he explained, clicking through a series of animated diagrams. The implications for machine learning, for artificial intelligence, for solving complex global challenges are profound. During the question and answer session that followed, the queries ranged from highly technical discussions about implementation challenges to broader questions about the societal implications of quantum-enhanced AI. Dr. Sarah Kim from Stanford asked about the potential for bias in quantum neural networks. As we develop these more powerful AI systems, how do we ensure they don't perpetuate or amplify the biases present in their training data? Marcus nodded appreciatively at the question. That's exactly the right question to ask, and it brings us back to why diversity in our field is so crucial. The people who design these systems, who choose the training data, who make decisions about implementation, they shape the outcomes. If we want AI that serves all of humanity fairly, we need teams that represent all of humanity. Another audience member asked about timeline for commercial applications. Marcus outlined a roadmap that showed practical quantum neural network systems becoming available within the next 5 to 7 years, with transformative applications in healthcare, finance, and scientific research. As the session concluded, Marcus noticed several CEOs huddled together in serious conversation. 2 board members were approaching the stage, determined expressions on their faces. The incident may have brought unwanted attention, but it was clear that the response was catalyzing real action. In the speaker's lounge after his keynote, Marcus found himself surrounded by tech executives, all eager to discuss both his research and his diversity initiative. The conversations were intense, substantive, and focused on concrete actions rather than just expressions of support. Nexus would like to be the first to match your $50 million, said Elena Vasquez, CEO of CloudTech Solutions, one of the leading cloud computing providers, and we'll be implementing immediate changes to our hiring and promotion practices. Dr. Patricia Chen from VentureFlow Capital stepped forward. We're committing to ensuring that at least 30% of our portfolio companies have diverse leadership teams within 2 years, and will provide additional funding support for startups led by underrepresented founders. James Morrison, CTO of Datadyne Corporation, added, "We're launching a partnership with historically Black colleges and universities to create direct pipelines for computer science graduates. This includes internships, scholarships, and guaranteed job placement programs." Marcus listened to each commitment, taking notes and asking follow-up questions to ensure the promises had substance behind them. He had seen too many corporate diversity initiatives that were heavy on press releases but light on actual change. "I appreciate all these commitments," he said, "but I want to suggest we go beyond just individual company initiatives. What if we created an industry-wide consortium? A formal network of companies committed to specific, measurable diversity goals with regular reporting and accountability." The suggestion sparked immediate interest. Within minutes, they were discussing governance structures, membership requirements, and metrics for success. This wasn't just reactive damage control, it was proactive industry transformation. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his sister Maya. "Just watched your keynote live stream. Mom would be so proud. You didn't just walk through that door, you kicked it wide open." He smiled, knowing it was true. His mother had always told him that doors would be closed in his face, but that he had the power to build new doors, even new buildings if necessary. A tap on his shoulder interrupted his thoughts. He turned to find a young black woman in a conference volunteer t-shirt, her eyes bright with admiration and nervous energy. "Dr. Washington, I'm Zoe Chen. I'm a sophomore at MIT studying computer science and quantum physics." Her voice trembled slightly with excitement. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything. What happened yesterday in the lobby? It happens to me all the time. Different situations, but the same feeling of having to prove I belong." Marcus gave her his full attention, recognizing the courage it took for her to approach him in this crowded room full of industry luminaries. "Seeing you up there today," Zoe continued, talking about the science, but also about opening doors. "It meant everything to me. I've been working on a project related to quantum error correction, and I was too intimidated to submit it to any conferences. But after hearing you speak, I think I will." "Tell me about your project," Marcus said, genuinely interested. Zoe's entire demeanor changed as she began explaining her research. Her nervousness disappeared, replaced by the passionate enthusiasm of a true scientist. She described an algorithm she had developed for reducing decoherence in quantum systems, a problem that had been plaguing quantum computing researchers for years. As she talked, Marcus realized he was listening to someone truly exceptional. Her approach was innovative, her understanding sophisticated, and her results potentially groundbreaking. "Zoe," he said when she finished, "this isn't just conference-worthy. This could be publication-worthy in a top-tier journal. Have you thought about submitting to physical review letters?" Her eyes widened. I didn't think I was ready for that level." "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need to change," Marcus said firmly. "Your work speaks for itself. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you that you don't belong at the highest levels of scientific discourse." Alicia Mercer appeared beside them, having overheard the conversation. "Actually, I was hoping to introduce you two. Zoe's been volunteering at our conferences for 2 years, and her insights about improving our technical programming have been invaluable." "I'd love to hear more about your quantum error correction work," Marcus said to Zoe. "In fact, my company is always looking for exceptional interns and graduate student collaborators. Would you be interested in discussing a summer research position?" Zoe's face lit up like she had just witnessed a miracle. "Are you serious? I've been following your research since freshman year. Working with your team would be a dream." "Email me your CV and a detailed description of your project," Marcus said, handing her his business card. "We can set up a video call next week to discuss possibilities." As they exchanged contact information, Marcus reflected on how this moment represented exactly the kind of change he wanted to see. Not just opening doors for exceptional individuals, but creating systems that identified and nurtured talent regardless of its packaging. His phone buzzed with another notification. This time, it was an email from an unexpected source. "Dr. Washington, you don't know me. My name is John Davidson. Until yesterday, I was employed by Harrington Security Services. I was the guard who stopped you in the lobby. I've spent the last 24 hours watching the video of our encounter, reading about your achievements, and thinking about my actions. I want to apologize, not just for the incident itself, but for the assumptions I made and the bias I displayed. I've been in security for 15 years, and I realize now that I've probably done similar things countless times without ever being confronted about it. Your keynote speech made me understand the impact of those actions, not just on individuals, but on entire communities and industries. I'm not asking for forgiveness or trying to get my job back. I just wanted you to know that your response to what I did has made me examine my own prejudices and commit to doing better. I've enrolled in diversity training and I'm volunteering with organizations that work to combat bias in law enforcement and security. Thank you for turning my mistake into a learning opportunity, not just for me, but for many others. John Davidson Marcus read the email twice. The apology seemed genuine, not defensive, not making excuses, but taking full responsibility and demonstrating real commitment to change. He considered his response carefully before typing, "Mr. Davidson, thank you for your email. It takes courage to examine our own biases and work to overcome them. I appreciate your willingness to turn this incident into an opportunity for growth. If you're serious about making a difference, I'm attaching information about several organizations that work on these issues. They would value the perspective of someone with your experience who has had this realization. Real change happens when we move beyond just recognizing problems to actively working on solutions." Marcus Washington. He hit send, then turned his attention back to the ongoing conversations in the speaker's lounge. The energy in the room was electric, not just from the excitement about quantum computing research, but from the sense that they were participating in something historically significant. 3 weeks after the conference, Marcus found himself in Washington, D.C., not for a technology event, but at the invitation of the House Subcommittee on Digital Technology and Innovation. The video of his encounter with Davidson had caught the attention of lawmakers who were increasingly concerned about diversity in the STEM workforce and the tech industry's role in addressing systemic inequality. The hearing room was packed with journalists, industry representatives, and members of the public. C-SPAN cameras captured every moment as Marcus straightened his tie, the same vibrant blue one he'd worn for his keynote, and prepared to testify before Congress. Beside him at the witness table sat Dr. Elena Vasquez from Cloud Tech Solutions, Dr. Patricia Wong from Stanford University's Computer Science Department, Marcus Johnson, no relation, CEO of the National Society of Black Engineers, and Dr. Sarah Kim from Harvard Business School, an expert on organizational diversity. Representative Maria Santos, the subcommittee chairwoman, called the hearing to order. Today, we're examining the state of diversity in America's technology sector and exploring policy solutions to ensure that all Americans can participate in our digital economy. She turned to Marcus. "Dr. Washington, thank you for joining us today. Your recent experience at the Global Technology Summit has sparked a national conversation about barriers facing underrepresented groups in tech. Could you start by describing that incident and what it reveals about broader systemic issues?" Marcus leaned toward the microphone, his voice clear and measured. "Thank you, Chairwoman Santos. My experience wasn't unique or even unusual. What made it different was that it happened to someone with enough visibility and platform to make people pay attention." He paused, looking down the panel of representatives, a diverse group that included several members who had themselves broken barriers in their paths to Congress. The question isn't just why I was stopped at that door, but how many brilliant minds have been turned away from doors throughout their careers, from classroom doors, from laboratory doors, from boardroom doors, because someone made assumptions about their capabilities based on their appearance. Representative David Kim from California leaned forward. "Dr. Washington, in your written testimony, you mentioned that you're one of only 8 Black CTOs in the Fortune 500. Can you explain why this matters beyond just representation?" "Absolutely," Marcus replied. "Diverse teams produce better outcomes. Research consistently shows that diverse groups are more innovative, make better decisions, and identify solutions that homogeneous teams miss. When we exclude talent based on bias rather than merit, We're not just hurting individuals, we're limiting our collective potential to solve complex problems. Representative Sarah Johnson from Texas, known for her skepticism of diversity initiatives, pressed him, but doesn't focusing on race and gender create reverse discrimination? Shouldn't we be purely merit-based in our hiring and promotion decisions? Marcus had anticipated this question. Representative Johnson, I appreciate the question because it gets to the heart of a common misconception. The goal isn't to lower standards or ignore merit. It's to ensure that merit is actually what we're measuring, rather than cultural fit or unconscious bias. He clicked to a slide on the screen behind him, showing research data. Studies have shown that identical resumes receive different response rates based solely on the names at the top. A resume from John Smith gets more callbacks than the same resume from Jamal Washington. That's not merit-based selection, that's bias-based selection. Dr. Kim from Harvard Business School added supporting evidence. Our research shows that when companies implement structured, bias-aware hiring processes, they actually end up with higher-performing employees across all demographic groups. Reducing bias doesn't compromise standards, it elevates them. The hearing continued for over 3 hours, covering topics ranging from STEM education funding to corporate diversity policies, to the role of government in addressing workplace discrimination. Marcus and the other witnesses provided detailed recommendations, increased federal funding for computer science education in underserved communities, tax incentives for companies that achieved measurable diversity goals, support for mentorship programs connecting industry professionals with students from underrepresented backgrounds, requirements for federal contractors to report diversity metrics in their technical workforce, funding for research into bias in artificial intelligence systems. Representative Santos concluded the hearing by announcing that the subcommittee would be drafting comprehensive legislation based on the testimony they had heard. The Digital Equity and Innovation Act will address many of the barriers we've discussed today, with the goal of ensuring that America's technology sector reflects the full diversity of American talent. After the hearing, Marcus was approached by congressional staffers, journalists, and advocacy groups wanting to continue the conversation. The young black staffer who had spoken to him earlier introduced himself as David Carter. Dr. Washington, I wanted to thank you again for what you're doing. My younger brother is a senior at Howard University studying computer science. Because of the visibility you've brought to these issues, he's gotten internship offers from 3 major tech companies this summer. Marcus shook David's hand. That's exactly what this is about, creating opportunities for the next generation. Actually, David continued, I wanted to ask if you'd be interested in serving on an advisory committee we're forming to help implement the Digital Equity Act. We need people who understand both the technical and the policy sides of these issues. Marcus considered the invitation. It would mean more time away from his research, more public speaking, more responsibility for issues beyond quantum computing, but it also represented an opportunity to create systemic change at the highest levels of government. Send me the details, he said. I'm interested. 6 months after the conference incident, Marcus found himself back at the Harrington Conference Center, but this time for a very different event, the inaugural summit of the Quantum Opportunity Initiative. The transformation was remarkable, not just in the diversity of the attendees, but in the entire atmosphere of the space. The same marble lobby that had been the site of his confrontation with Davidson now buzzed with energy from a completely different crowd. Young computer science students from historically black colleges and universities mingled with venture capitalists. High school students from underserved communities talked excitedly with tech executives. Teachers from Title I schools compared notes with researchers from major laboratories. The security team was notably different as well. Gone was Harrington Security Services, replaced by a firm known for its progressive hiring practices and comprehensive bias training. The head of security, Colonel retired Janet Davis, was a black woman with military bearing and a reputation for both professionalism and inclusivity. "Dr. Washington," she greeted him at the entrance. "Welcome back. I trust this experience will be quite different from your last visit." Marcus smiled as he accepted his VIP badge, an unnecessary formality now, but an important symbol. "I certainly hope so, Colonel, though I have to say the real change isn't just in the security protocols, it's in who's walking through these doors." Indeed, the conference hall was filled with faces that reflected the true diversity of American talent. The Quantum Opportunity Initiative had grown far beyond Marcus's initial $50 million commitment. Other companies had not only matched but exceeded that investment, creating a consortium worth over $300 million dedicated to supporting underrepresented groups in STEM fields. On stage, Zoe Chen, now a rising star in quantum computing and the first recipient of a Quantum Opportunity Fellowship, was demonstrating her error correction algorithm to rapt attention. Her research had been published in Physical Review Letters, exactly as Marcus had predicted, and she was now being recruited by doctoral programs at MIT, Stanford, and Caltech. "Her work is absolutely groundbreaking," Dr. Patricia Wong whispered to Marcus as they watched from the wings. "She's solving problems that have stumped researchers with decades more experience." Marcus nodded with pride. Zoe represented exactly what was possible when talent was identified and nurtured regardless of packaging. Her algorithm was being implemented in quantum computing systems around the world, and she was barely 20 years old. The day's programming included panels on emerging technologies, workshops on quantum computing applications, and presentations from student researchers. But the most powerful moments came during the mentorship sessions, where young people had one-on-one conversations with industry leaders who looked like them and understood their experiences. Marcus spent his morning meeting with a group of high school students from Detroit who had developed a machine learning application for predicting and preventing urban flooding. Their work was sophisticated, innovative, and directly applicable to one of the most pressing challenges facing American cities. "Have you thought about pursuing computer science in college?" Marcus asked the team leader, a 17-year-old named Aisha Williams. "I want to," Aisha replied, "but I'm worried about the costs, and honestly, I'm not sure I'd fit in at these big tech schools." "Let me tell you something," Marcus said, looking at each member of the team. "Your project is more advanced than anything I was doing in high school. You absolutely belong at any institution in the country, and there are resources available to make sure cost isn't a barrier." He spent the next hour connecting them with scholarship opportunities, summer research programs, and mentors who could guide them through the college application process. By the end of the conversation, all 4 team members had concrete plans for pursuing STEM degrees. Similar conversations were happening throughout the conference center. Industry executives were discovering exceptional talent they might never have encountered otherwise. Students were gaining access to opportunities that had previously been closed to them. Teachers were learning about new resources to support their students. During lunch, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Dr. Washington, this is John Davidson. I saw the news coverage of your conference today. I wanted you to know that I'm now working as a diversity trainer with the organization you recommended. We're developing bias prevention programs for security and law enforcement agencies across the country. Thank you for helping me turn the worst mistake of my career into something meaningful." Marcus stared at the message for a moment, still amazed by the ripple effects that had emerged from that single moment in the lobby. He typed back, "That's excellent, John. Real change happens when we're willing to examine our biases and work to overcome them. Keep up the good work." The afternoon keynote was delivered by Dr. Angela Martinez, a Latina computer scientist who had become the first person in her family to attend college and was now leading groundbreaking research on artificial intelligence ethics. Her story resonated powerfully with the diverse audience. 10 years ago, when I was a graduate student, I was often the only woman and the only person of color in my research group, she said. I spent so much energy trying to prove I belonged that I almost lost sight of why I loved the science in the first place. She clicked to a slide showing her current research team, a diverse group of brilliant minds working on ensuring AI systems were fair, transparent, and beneficial to all communities. Today, my lab looks like the world we're trying to serve, and not coincidentally, our research is better, more comprehensive, and more impactful because of that diversity. As the day wound down, Marcus found himself in conversation with Elena Vasquez, whose company had been one of the first to join the Quantum Opportunity Initiative. "The results have been incredible," she told him. "Our diversity hiring is up 300%. Our innovation metrics are at all-time highs, and our employee satisfaction scores have improved across all demographic groups. More importantly," she continued, "we're solving problems we couldn't solve before. When you have teams that reflect the diversity of your customer base, you identify needs and solutions that homogeneous teams miss." The conference concluded with a panel discussion on the future of technology and inclusion. Marcus sat alongside Zoe, Dr. Martinez, Elena Vasquez, and David Carter, the congressional staffer who had been instrumental in passing the Digital Equity and Innovation Act. The moderator asked each panelist to share their vision for the next decade of technology and diversity. "I envision a tech industry where talent is identified and nurtured regardless of zip code, skin color, or family income," Elena said. "Where a brilliant kid from rural Mississippi has the same opportunities as a brilliant kid from Palo Alto." Zoe added, "I want to see quantum computing teams that look like the quantum phenomena we study, diverse, complex, and full of unexpected possibilities." When it was Marcus's turn, he looked out at the audience filled with faces that represented the future of American innovation. 5 years ago, if you had told me that being profiled by a security guard would lead to congressional testimony, industry-wide reform, and conferences like this one, I would have thought you were crazy," he said, drawing laughter from the audience. "But that's the power of turning obstacles into opportunities. Every barrier we encounter can become a door we open for others. Every moment of discrimination can become a catalyst for systematic change." He paused, his gaze finding young faces in the audience. "Students who would carry this work forward. My vision for the next decade is simple. I want the next generation of technologists to focus on solving humanity's greatest challenges, not on proving they belong in the room. And I want those rooms to be filled with the full spectrum of human talent and perspective." The applause was thunderous, but more meaningful than the volume was the energy in the room, the sense of possibility, of potential being unlocked, of doors being opened that would stay open. 1 year after the incident in the lobby, Marcus was invited back to the Global Technology Summit, not just as a keynote speaker, but as the recipient of the conference's first ever Innovation and Impact Award. The recognition wasn't just for his quantum computing research, but for his role in catalyzing industry-wide change. The same lobby where Davidson had stopped him now featured a prominent display about the Digital Equity and Innovation Act, which had been signed into law 6 months earlier. The legislation provided funding for STEM education in underserved communities created tax incentives for companies achieving diversity goals, and established research grants for studying bias in technology systems. The impact was already visible. Applications from underrepresented minorities to computer science programs had increased by 45% nationwide. Tech companies were reporting their most diverse hiring classes in history, and breakthrough innovations were emerging from the newly diverse teams that had been formed. Nexus Innovations had become a model for inclusive tech companies. Under Marcus's leadership, they had not only maintained their position as leaders in quantum computing research, but had also become the most sought-after employer for top talent from all backgrounds. Zoe Chen was now a PhD student at MIT, working on a joint project with Marcus's team that promised to revolutionize quantum error correction. Her research was being funded by the Quantum Opportunity Initiative, and she was already being recruited by major tech companies for post-graduation positions. The security industry had also undergone significant changes. Following the publicity around Davidson's actions, security firms across the country had implemented bias training programs. A new certification process required security personnel to demonstrate competency in inclusive customer service and bias recognition. John Davidson himself had become an unlikely advocate for change. His work with bias prevention organizations had led to speaking engagements at security industry conferences, where he shared his story as a cautionary tale and a call to action. "I was operating on 15 years of unchecked assumptions," he would tell audiences. "It took a national incident to make me realize the harm I was causing. Don't wait for your wake-up call to examine your own biases." The broader tech industry had embraced the changes with varying degrees of enthusiasm, but the results were undeniable. Companies with diverse leadership teams were outperforming their homogeneous competitors on innovation metrics, employee satisfaction, and financial performance. The Quantum Opportunity Initiative had expanded internationally, with similar programs being established in Europe, Asia, and Africa. The model of industry consortium-supported diversity initiatives was being replicated in other sectors, from finance to healthcare to renewable energy. Marcus continued to balance his research with his advocacy work, serving on the Congressional Advisory Committee that oversaw implementation of the Digital Equity Act. His quantum computing breakthroughs had led to practical applications in drug discovery, climate modeling, and artificial intelligence that were beginning to address some of humanity's most pressing challenges. But perhaps the most meaningful change was evident in the faces of the students who now filled computer science classrooms, research laboratories, and tech company offices across the country. The next generation of innovators looked like America, diverse, brilliant, and full of potential. At the award ceremony, as Marcus stood at the same podium where he had delivered his transformational keynote a year earlier, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. "A year ago, I was stopped at a door because someone couldn't see past their assumptions about who belonged in certain spaces," he said to the packed auditorium. "Today, we've opened thousands of doors for talented individuals who might otherwise have been overlooked." He paused, looking out at an audience that was dramatically more diverse than the previous year's gathering. But this isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. Every person in this room has the power to identify talent, open opportunities, and create change. The question isn't whether bias exists. We know it does. The question is what we're going to do about it. The standing ovation lasted several minutes, but more importantly, it was followed by action. Over the next hour, Marcus watched as conference attendees signed up for mentorship programs, committed funding to diversity initiatives, and formed partnerships to support underrepresented students and entrepreneurs. Change, he realized, didn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it built quietly, one open door at a time, until suddenly the world looked different than it had before. Later that evening at the conference reception, the same VIP event he had been prevented from entering a year earlier, Marcus found himself surrounded by a new generation of tech leaders, young entrepreneurs, diverse research teams, and innovative thinkers who represented the future of the industry. Colonel Davis approached him with a smile. "Dr. Washington, I wanted to thank you for what you've accomplished here. My daughter is starting her computer science degree at Howard University next fall, and she says you're the reason she believes she can become a quantum computing researcher." Marcus shook her hand, moved by the personal impact of the changes they had catalyzed. "Tell her I look forward to seeing her research someday, and remind her that the doors are open now. It's up to her generation to keep them that way." As the evening wound down, Marcus stepped out onto the conference center's terrace, looking out at the city skyline. His phone showed dozens of messages, interview requests, collaboration proposals, and updates from the various initiatives that had grown out of that single moment in the lobby. One message stood out from a young black girl in Chicago. "Dr. Washington, I'm 14 and I want to be a quantum physicist like you. My teacher showed our class the video of what happened to you and how you turned it into something positive. I just wanted you to know that I'm not scared anymore about pursuing science. Thank you for showing me that I belong." Marcus smiled, saving the message. This was why the work mattered, not just for the individuals who benefited directly, but for all the young minds who now saw a possibility where they once saw barriers. The quantum world operated on principles that seemed impossible: particles existing in multiple states simultaneously, information traveling instantaneously across vast distances, observation itself changing reality. But perhaps the most quantum principle of all was the idea that small actions could create massive changes, that a single moment of injustice could become a catalyst for systemic transformation. Marcus looked up at the stars, thinking about his mother and all the doors she had been unable to open. The revolution she had dreamed of was finally underway, carried forward by brilliant minds from every background, working together to solve humanity's greatest challenges. The future was watching, and it looked more like the full spectrum of human potential than ever before.